Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. I'm Savaseca, of course, but today's video is going to be a bit of a different video. I'm not going to be doing a video of where I read off a script and I put loads of graphics and overlays on screen. It's going to be me talking to you about the current state of Portuguese football, to which I believe is one of the most toxic, or if not the most toxic, it's ever been in a while. And there's a few reasons behind that, but I'm going to sort of go off the top of my head to why I think it is. And I know people are going to disagree, and that's fine. I want an open conversation. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments, whether you're a Benfica fan, Sporting fan, Porto fan. I'm going to try and remain as unbiased as possible. I will try my best. I will not promise anything. The main thing, what I'm really annoyed at the moment with Portuguese football, is the narrative that it creates, and the negative narrative it creates almost, because on the face of it, looking in right now at Portuguese football, there are so many things to look at and think, wow, that's actually really cool. First, Gil Vicente are doing really well under Sérgio Peixoto, and they are like 2 points or 1 point below Benfica. If they would have won on the weekend, they would have gone above them. And I think that is crazy how well Gil Vicente are playing. And I think it's one of the stories that, you know, on the outside, you're looking like, wow, Gil Vicente are playing really well. Another narrative is Moreirense streaming their home games on free-to-air TV on TVI, making it more accessible for people to watch football, and that includes home games against Sporting, against Porto, against Benfica, allowing more people to watch football for free. And I can see that maybe growing up now, how I grew up watching football, that maybe people won't have access to football. Maybe someone is going to watch a Moreirense game for the first time, or even if it's like a Moreirense versus Sporting for the first time, Benfica or Porto, they're going to see that for the first time, and maybe that's their introduction to football. I think that's really cool in the grand scheme of things. And you look at other things in Portuguese football, like Moreirense, I mentioned earlier, they're still playing well as well as streaming the games. But you look at Alverco, backed by Vinicius Jr., and they've got players like Lincoln, they've got Chiquinho, they've got exciting players, and so many other clubs are doing pretty well at the moment as well. You look at Nacional, who are doing really well at the moment, and the list goes on. But no matter how good those teams do, no matter how good other narratives are, is always pinpointed to refereeing decisions, and more importantly, the communications between the big three and the statements they put out, I think is just embarrassing. And the reason I think it's embarrassing is because I'm an avid watcher of Portuguese football. It's the league I watch the most. I've never made any other, opinions. Say I watch the Premier League a lot. To be honest, in the Premier League, I watch some of the big games, and I watch, a few others here and there. But I know for a fact that if, let's say, Arsenal get a penalty decision that is wrongly awarded or should have been awarded to them but wasn't, they're not making statements the next day saying the referees are corrupt or the referees are in favour of this or that.
And one of the times I do remember it happening is when Nottingham Forest came out and they said that they had some decisions not given, and they were absolutely slated by it, by pundits, by fans, because it is embarrassing. And it's something that happens so often in the Portuguese league that I'm sort of blinded to it. But when it does happen in other leagues, everyone thinks it's embarrassing and a joke.
Or let's say if Tottenham, or let's say more direct rivals right now, Man City get a penalty awarded for them that wasn't a penalty, they're not putting a statement out saying, oh, Man City have influence over the referees and stuff. Even in leagues that you would argue are more fiery and passionate, I don't think I've seen statements from Inter Milan, AC Milan, from other rivals in France, in Germany. I've not seen it. Maybe it's because I'm not privy to it and I don't have access. I don't follow Inter Milan and AC Milan and Juventus and those clubs on social media. But to that level, I don't see it as much and as frequent as Sporting, Benfica, and Porto do. And this week it stems from the incorrect decision, and I'm a Sporting fan, incorrect decision to give us a corner in the last minute. Obviously resulting in a goal, incorrect decision, and 2 points were lost a point was lost for Santa Clara, and Sporting gained 2 extra points. For really it shouldn't have been a corner, and it wouldn't have resulted in a goal. But at the same time, in that same game, there is a goal kick that is awarded, even though the keeper saved it out of bounds, or out of play even. I don't know why I said out of bounds. I've been watching too much NBA, clearly. Out of play. and the referee doesn't award a corner. We could have scored from that corner. Who knows, right? But the narrative that they were helping Sporting or Sporting pressured referees into doing so is just ridiculous. And it's not just a Sporting thing. It is a league-wide thing. It is, Benfica saying that Porto are pressure referees, or Porto saying Benfica, or both of them saying Sporting, whatever. Every single decision that happens in Liga Portugal is magnified times 10 when it happens to a member of the big three. And the constant bickering and the communication, little shots fired, and the aforementioned, pressure on referees, it really makes the league look so amateur. And it's one of the reasons the league will never progress into the levels it should be. And like I said, there are so many good stories that we can focus on, but the media won't focus on that because they would rather get clicks and sell papers and get more interaction on social media by promoting the bad referees and the communications and things like that. And it's disappointing, but I know, we all know at this point, media, whether it's Portuguese, English, Spanish, bad news sells better than good news, and that's just media in general. But it is quite disappointing to see how much this overshadows. And if you didn't watch my series of Touchline to Gal, which is just basically a recap of the game week and who the best performers are, one, I'd recommend you watch it, but two, you might have missed that the referees actually went on a silent protest this week because they feel that the club officials are coming out and pressuring the referees and leaving them in tight situations that would, result in also being insulted in public or getting death threats and things like that. And it was all coming from the top. It comes from André Villas-Boas, Frederico Varandas, Rui Costa. They're the ones that influence it. And I will say, Benfica and Porto on social media, Benfica one I can remember the most, their video of all the refereeing decisions that have gone against Benfica and that little meme of the cartoon character. Like, that is the official Twitter account. The official Twitter account of Benfica, the club with the most socials in the world, as far as I'm aware, and breaking Guinness World Records of most socials voted in an election, and they're acting like that. But what is even weirder to me is that some fans, not all, some fans will see that and be like, yeah, well done Benfica, Benfica Ben. But I look at that, even for Sporting, and Sporting have done it. And I remember before one of the communication directors was Miguel Braga, and he used to come out with statements all the time. And even Frederico Varandas comes out with statements about refereeing. I hate it. Even if I do believe Sporting might have been, I'd say robbed, or they might have, lost points because of bad refereeing decisions, and they come out with statements. But look at this game at Benfica, look at this game at Porto. And to me, I just really don't see it. Like, I think it's so embarrassing. And I even tweeted something a few weeks ago to that effect of saying, even when my own club does it, I find it embarrassing. And I got some not so nice comments about things, and, people disagree with me, and people saying, speak Portuguese. And like, I know I was born in England, my first language is English, I think in English. And people tell me, no, you can't think in English. Like, anyway, digress. It's embarrassing, and it puts the league in a very bad light, because not everyone following Benfica on social media is going to be a Benfica fan. There might be fans of Manchester United, Man City, Chelsea, whatever. But they're going to see that video and they're going to see all the replies to it, and they're going to think, why is an official Twitter account doing that? Chelsea Twitter official account's not going to do that. Arsenal, Man City, they're not going to be putting refereeing decisions or bad calls against them on social media. Why? Because it's embarrassing. It is embarrassing. But it's not just a Benfica thing or Porto thing. It's a big three thing. It is ridiculous. And it sets the league back heavy. And for people wanting me to say it in Portuguese, a Liga Portugal é uma vergonha. Like, and for me, the big three are responsible. And I just don't think it could grow. I made a video, and I truly still believe that there is potential for the big three era to end. And I think with the investment to other clubs, and I know sometimes it backfires, and it has, for example, like Boavista or Belenenses have lost, fans, they've lost clubs, they've lost years of history because of poor investment. But I look at teams like Morientes right now who are doing well with the Bournemouth connection, and you've got Alverca with Vinicius Junior, and you've got Braga with PSG, Famalicão with Jorge Mendes. Another good story, by the way. Famalicão doing very well at the moment. And I think with the current stability they have, in a few years, I'm not saying 5 years, 10 years, but why can't they challenge? Why can't they keep progressing if they're getting the talents in? And they've got a lot of great talent in at the moment. I think looking through some of the Portuguese clubs outside the big three, potentially even big four, you look at players I mentioned earlier for Alverca, you've got players like Chiquinho and Lincoln, who Lincoln was playing for Fenerbahce less than I think 2 years ago, and he was playing I think in the Championship for Hull, maybe Stoke, I think it was Hull, and now he's came to Alverca. Chiquinho was playing for Wolves, and I believe he was playing for Stoke actually less than a few years ago, and was linked to Sporting 2 years ago, and he's at Alverca. You look at teams like Gil Vicente, who have got Pablo up front, who's scoring goals for them left, right and centre. You've got even someone like a Jose Font for Casapia, a centre-back, 41. I know he's not at the peak of his powers, don't get me wrong, but still having people come into the league like that. And there are other examples that I'm probably forgetting right now. But the league right now, in terms of player quality, is some of the best it's ever been outside and inside the big three. I think you look at Porto right now, they're fantastic, and they've got fantastic defenders like Kirill, for example, Bednarek. I think they're big acquisitions. But you've also got guys like Victor Froholt, Gabi Veiga. The list goes on. Rodrigo Mora and Giovanni Kenda are some of the brightest talents in football, not just in Portugal, but in football. But again, it's always overshadowed by the big three and how bad the referees are. And the referee thing going on strike, I agree with them. I agree that the referees are sort of hung out to dry by the Liga Portugal because they're not doing enough to stop Frederico Varandas or Rui Costa or Andreas Boas from pressuring referees by putting out statements and having other club fans attack them because of it and insult them and death threats and stuff. And I know obviously that's not the end goal for them, at least I hope not. But I agree that the referees should take a stand because the Liga Portugal just lets it happen. And I think I mentioned in previous videos as well, the refereeing is not up to standard. The refereeing in general is poor. 100% agreed. But we're not going to get referees improvement because no one wants to be a referee. Why would you? If you're, I don't care if you're 45 watching this video or you're a teenager, why would you, at any point in your life, if someone offered you now, said, would you want to be a Portuguese referee? You'd say no. Because one, it is too much stress. Two, like nothing you can do is correct. Even if you get the right call, someone's going to be saying you're making the wrong call. And it is so much pressure for them. And it's that narrative that's been handed down by the big three. I would hate to be a referee in general. And referees in general are poorly protected. But in Liga Portugal, it's just a whole nother level. And I just think it's so toxic. And for once, I actually look at Benfica fans, Porto fans, Sporting fans. I don't think they're the toxic ones in this scenario, and they have been in the past, of course. But for me, it's just the three presidents constantly putting out these communications that make it worse than what the fans are doing. And, you know, fans get fined for tifos and flares and stuff, but you're not finding these clubs heavy enough, or you're not putting enough sanctions on them to come out with statements, because there should be sanctions. Sanction them, find them bigger wages, or I don't know. I don't think as far to go as points deduction and things like that. But it's crazy. And I think that the main story is that main story a few weeks ago was that the Porto officials left the TV on in the referee's room that he couldn't turn off of a replay of a mistake. And if it is the mistake that is the Victor Froholt goal, it wasn't a mistake. By law, Victor Froholt was offside at the goal. He was outside of the pitch, he comes back on, he scores. That is offside. That is the right call. And you can argue if it's for Bednarek, maybe Bednarek doesn't foul him. But in terms of the goal, it is the right call. But again, the clubs, and this is a bit of a different example because they did it directly to the referee, influencing referees. But Rui Costa has done it, Frederico Varandas has done it, whether it's via statements or via actually going up to referees. It keeps happening, and the refereeing is not going to get any better this way because no one wants to be a referee right now. If I was genuinely the referees in Portugal, I would just go on strike full stop. I know people say, oh, the referees are bad, and I agree, they're not great. But how much of it is also external pressure on them from clubs, from fans, from everyone? It is a horrible time to be a referee in today's climate in general, and it always has been. But when you look at the refereeing League of Portugal, I just don't understand it. I really don't understand how this league continues to let the big three get away with stuff like this with pressure from referees. And I'm going to end it with a thing that I will hold my hands up and say, in the past, when I was watching football, when I was younger, I was always the Sporting always robbed. Sporting have been robbed for years, and there are cases where referees have harmed Sporting because of bad errors and things, and I'm not going to deny that. But it's not. I personally don't think, and like I said, feel free to disagree. It is not because Sporting are not favoured by referees, and of course there has been, over time there's been corruption scandals, whether it's a Peter Dorado, whether it's Cesar Boaventura. But I look at the league now, and I think people say, the referees are in favour of Sporting. Okay, they're in favour of Sporting. Why? Because they won the title last year and the year before. But what about the years before that? They weren't in favour of Sporting. What happened? What happened between those years? And people say Porto are corrupt. Okay, what happened to Porto 2-3 years ago that they haven't won a title for that long? Why are they now suddenly corrupt? And Benfica, how are these teams corrupt? But then if they're corrupting and not winning well, then how are they corrupt? Do you know what I mean? I feel like that didn't really make a lot of sense. But people are saying this club is corrupt. This club is corrupt because they're in first or because they're winning games. But at the end of the day, I truly don't believe. I believe in the past clubs have been corrupt and they've been found guilty or not guilty, but the evidence is there, and there has been allegations and there's been some points of evidence. Whether you want to believe is guilty or not guilty, there is evidence there, right? For Peter Dorado, for things like Cesar Boaventura or Cashball, whatever you want to say, there is evidence there that people will point to. And I'm in no position to say that people were right or wrong, or are guilty or not guilty. That's for the courts to decide. Courts originally found them guilty, but they're not guilty because of illegal wiretaps for Porto's case. But that's a different rabbit hole entirely. But I truly believe right now that no club in Portugal is corrupt. And people will say, oh, because you're a Sporting fan. But I've had that mentality now since, I want to say maybe since 17, 18. I've had that mentality. Maybe 18, 19, that I'm just like, hold on, no one's actually corrupt. It's just that the referees are bad. And the people that you can believe or might believe were corrupt, Pinto da Costa is no longer president of Porto. Luis Felipe Vieira is no longer president of Benfica. So there's a new guard. Is Andre Villas-Boas suddenly corrupt despite only being in power for 2 years? Rui Costa, fair enough, was the right-hand man of Luis Felipe Vieira. But is he corrupt? I don't know. But I, in my humble opinion, and I know my opinion doesn't mean anything to anyone, but I struggle to believe that there is corruption going on. I think it's just referees being poor. And the Benfica game, right? I think Benfica, you could argue they were robbed, but you can also argue against the fact that they weren't, because the penalty that they conceded, fair enough, 100%, don't think it is. The keeper saved it. All Thomas Ruja has to do is clear the ball, and he puts it in top bins. That is not the referee's fault. That is not the penalty taker's fault. That's on Thomas Araujo. There is so many different options. I know it's the moment in the game. Put it to the left, let the goalkeeper come get it, whatever it is. And he puts it in the top corner. And then their second goal is Richard Rios actually kicking himself, falling over, feigning an injury to himself, and letting Casapia score. And even you can say Benfica should have had a penalty awarded against them before, because Antonio Silva pulls down the Casapia player if it's outside the box, or inside the box wasn't given as a foul anyway. But this is what I mean. There is no consistency. Porto will point to in the Clásico against Benfica that Dennis Gore was fouled. I believe Dennis Gore was fouled. I believe that's a penalty, right? But I also believe the one on Gyökeres was a penalty for Thiago Jalou for exactly the same thing last year, and it wasn't given. And it's not because Porto are corrupt or Benfica are corrupt or Sporting are corrupt. It's because the refereeing is poor. There is no consistency between any of the referees, and there won't continue to be because they are pressured so much. But this is a bit of a convoluted video. I've been recording for 20 minutes. I don't know if I'll video will make 20 minutes or it'll be shorter. But I look at the current state of Portuguese football and I see toxicity when really there shouldn't be. And it is all three of the club's fault. It's not based on one. It's every single one that is contributing to the negative toxicity and the negative atmosphere, when we should be focusing on the positives, the Morienses, the Gil Vicents. We're focusing on poor refereeing decisions with corners that shouldn't have been corners and penalties that shouldn't have been penalties, or things like that, or pressuring referees, things like that. And it's embarrassing. It is embarrassing. If anyone from the outside looks in at this league, it's embarrassing. I've grown up around this league and I've been watching it since 2009, 2008. I think it's the first game I ever remember watching in Liga Portugal, and I've watched it since. And usually you think with time things are going to get better and, you know, the league will modernize, but it hasn't. It really hasn't. Even with the introduction of VAR, there's still so many negative things, and VAR was supposed to remove all doubt, but in such it's added more, because no one can be trusted to do anything, because people are going to accuse people of corruption or going to accuse people of pressuring referees. So what is the answer? I think there either needs to be heavier sanctions on clubs releasing statements like they do and social media posts like they do. But I also think there needs to be a change in sort of letting the referees, one, be hung out to dry, but two, the referees in general, to be fair. But something needs to change, whether it's the governing body of Portugal. Maybe they need to get people outside of Portugal in to make it fair, but then you can argue that you're taking jobs away from Portugal, which is again fair. What's annoying is that you really don't see any way out of it, if that makes sense. There is no clear path that I can see. This is how it's going to change. And that video I made about the Big Three era coming to an end, the way it's currently going, it doesn't look like it's ever going to end, because the amount of influence the Big Three have over the refereeing and the league and the rest of the teams is poor. And I know technically I'm contributing to the media. I'm not saying I'm a journalist or anything, but I am hypocritical saying that people decide to focus on negative things, and here I am producing negative content about Liga Portugal. So in that aspect, fair enough, but we should be focusing on the Gil Vicents, the Morienses, or, you know, the Alvercas, the Familiar Cows, these teams that are doing well beyond their means and actually surprise packages in Portuguese football. Nacional, even a club like Sporting Braga in Europe, for example, they're doing pretty well in Europe, but it's not talked about because everything else around the Big Three is talked about. But I've spoken for way too much. I hope I've gotten my point across. Please let me know if you disagree or agree in the comments. Like I said, a very different video. No script was followed, straight from the head or the heart, whichever one you want to go with. Yeah, just the state of Portuguese football. I think it's poor. Going into a World Cup year as well. You know, I don't think it'll have that much effect on the national team, but, you know, it's a toxic environment, and I think people looking outside are going to think the same. And I think the league will possibly never grow unless something changes, and it's not going to be change overnight. It's got to be an institutional change, I think. But what do you guys think? Do you agree with me, or do you think I'm overreacting? Do you think it's, you know, unfair to say that no club is corrupt or no club is pressure referees? Do you think, you know, I know the fans of Sporting will think Benfica's corrupt and Benfica will think Porto's corrupt and so on and so forth, but objectively, what do you think? Is there corruption in Liga Portugal? Should there be these statements coming out between the Big Three? What do you think? Anyway, I've been Sam Vasega. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time, and peace.